Yes, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me. We are resuming the practice of holding briefings for international media. We haven't been doing it for a while, but I'm glad that you are back, and thank you for your interest in it. So, since it's a first briefing of this kind in months, I would like to begin with a couple of with some introductory remarks, and then I will be happy to reply to your questions. So the Ukrainian defense forces continue to defend our country from Russian invaders along more than 1,200 kilometers of active front line. It's been almost 25 months since Russia launched its full-scale invasion that was intended to destroy our country in a matter of weeks, if not days. But Russia failed to achieve this goal, and yet it does not abandon its plans to occupy more land and kill more Ukrainians. And Russian intentions, Russia's ultimate plan remains unchanged. They want to destroy the country, and we have no doubts if they succeed, they will proceed with attacking other countries in Europe or Central Asia, because they are guided by the expansionist logic and ambition. For those who do not believe that Moscow can do this, it's really simple. Putin wants to restore the influence of the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire. He disregards international law, existing borders and norms. He denies Ukraine's right to exist as a sovereign nation. But we are not the only nation whose right to exist, at least within current borders, he denies. Ukrainians want to live in our own country and make our own decisions. This is why today we have no other choice than to defend our country with arms. And I wish that at least some of the journalists present at this briefing will never experience this happening to their own countries. So, the situation at the front line remains tense. Russia's war tactics are brutal, and they have always been like this. They raze entire towns and villages to the ground. Using their advantage in the air, Russians actively throw guided aerial bombs at Ukrainian villages and towns. Each such bomb weighs from 500 kilograms to 1.5 tons. Simultaneously, they press their way forward by sending soldiers. These soldiers get killed, but then the next wave marches over the dead bodies of the predecessors. The Russians themselves call these tactics meat-storms. We repel these attacks, but at the painful cost of our warriors getting killed and injured. Ukraine is different from Russia. We value the lives of our soldiers, and therefore we are seeking technological advantages over the enemy in order to save the lives of soldiers and defend our land. Parallel to attacks on the front lines, Russia continues to terrorize peaceful Ukrainian cities with daily missile and drone strikes on civilians, leading to the death and injuries of men, women, the elderly, and children. With this brutality in the background, it's no surprising that Ukraine requires more and quicker military aid from its partners. We have already increased our own defense output threefold last year, and will increase it sixfold this year. But the scale of war is enormous, which is why we still require military supplies from the allies. The priority needs of Ukraine include air defense, from portable to frontline complexes to large air defense systems to cover cities. We also need ammunition for air defense. Other critical needs include artillery ammunition, insufficient quantities, and artillery systems. Drones are the new heroes of the war, and there will be never enough of them, although Ukraine is producing a lot of drones, but we are also expecting supplies of them to Ukraine. Another top priority is having more long-range missiles to effectively destroy Russian logistics and command posts in Ukraine's occupied territories. We also need more armored vehicles and engineering equipment. Consider when you hear that Ukraine's goals are unattainable and it's impossible to defeat Russia or to make them concede and recognize the new reality. You can respond with a very simple example, the story of Ukrainian maritime experts over the last 2 years. It demonstrates the best way to put Russia in its place and solve the problems it causes around the world. Here are some facts to support what I'm saying. Russia launched its full-scale aggression in February 2022, blocking Ukrainian seaports and food exports, causing global food prices to skyrocket and putting millions of people who faced acute food shortages at risk of starvation. Russia was forced to accept the Black Sea Grain Initiative in July 2022, which partially unblocked Ukrainian exports and helped to alleviate global food market pressure. Russia then obstructed the initiative's operation, eventually killing it in July 2023. In August 2023, Ukraine decided to act while others hesitated. We resumed our maritime exports without seeking Moscow's permission. The armed forces of Ukraine secured our own maritime export corridor. We destroyed a significant portion of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and used air defenses provided by partners to secure this route. Since then, we have shipped 28 million tons of cargo to 42 countries, 20.5 million during the 3 winter months. Only in February this year, 8 million tons of cargo went through the Odessa seaport, 5.2 million of which was food products. These are record numbers in 2 years. This winter, Ukrainian grain shipped through the corridor was delivered to consumers in 33 countries: Algeria, Bangladesh, Belgium, Bulgaria, China, Cyprus, Egypt, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece, India, Indonesia, Iraq, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco, the Netherlands, Nigeria, Pakistan, Portugal, Qatar, the Republic of Korea, Romania, Singapore, Spain, Tunisia, Turkey, United Kingdom, and Vietnam. During this time, the majority of our food exports went to consumers in countries outside Europe and North America. On top of commercial exports, Ukraine continues to ship thousands of tons of humanitarian grain free of charge to the most vulnerable families in the countries around the world under President Zelensky's Grain from Ukraine humanitarian initiative. The story of Ukraine resuming its maritime food exports is the recipe for global food security, as well as international peace and stability. But most importantly, we do not seek favors from Russia in order to solve the problems Russia has created. And this approach should be large-scaled and used for other cases as well. Push Russia back with force and solve the problems it creates. Do not be afraid to take the initiative and do not give in to Russian blackmail. This is the strategy Ukraine pursues. From food and energy security to finding strategic solutions to end the war, the formula for success remains unchanged. No country in the world wants peace more than Ukraine. Our country and people never wanted this war. We never attacked anyone and gave no reason to anyone to attack us. This is not a situation of two countries simply fighting each other. This is a situation when one country attacks another, occupies its land, kills its people, violates all international norms, commits unspeakable atrocities, and does not want to stop. In these circumstances, there is no other choice for us than to defend ourselves. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky proposed the peace formula. It remains the only realistic plan for restoring just peace in Ukraine, as well as global stability. We believe that it is in the interest of the vast majority of states to restore respect for international law when it comes to territorial integrity. Because if Russia is allowed to succeed in Ukraine, every aggressive country in the world will be tempted to do the same to its neighbors. Ukraine also initiated the first Global Peace Summit. This event will take place in Switzerland, and we are grateful to our Swiss partners for agreeing to host it. The date is still being decided because we need to synchronize it with leaders' schedules. The summit will bring together leaders who value international law and peace. Countries will be able to agree on a vision of peace that is just, long-lasting, and based on the principles of the United Nations Charter. And I would like to remind that over 140 countries voted in favor of Ukraine-related resolutions in the UN General Assembly. These resolutions condemn Russia's aggression and demand that Moscow withdraw troops from Ukraine. 3/4 of all countries representing all continents and regions condemn the illegal invasion and demand that Russia get out of Ukraine. I think this is a solid basis for a joint vision of just peace based on international law and UN Charter principles. Russia will not be able to ignore the will of the global majority if we all speak with one voice. The first Global Peace Summit in Switzerland presents an excellent opportunity for this, and I invite all countries that value peace to join our diplomatic effort to put an end to Russian aggression. With this, I conclude my remarks. We still have some good time, half an hour, to talk, and let me proceed to your questions.
Okay, let's start with, I see Andras Nemes with us from Hungary, so let's start from closest neighbors, Hungary.
Good afternoon, Mr. Minister. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I read that we will meet our Minister for Foreign Affairs next week, and I would like you to ask how would you evaluate now relationship between Hungary and Ukraine after the meeting of Prime Minister and President, and what do you expect from the next week meeting with Mr. Szijjártó? Thank you.
Well, so far the meeting with Peter is not on my schedule, but so I don't know where this information comes from, but it's true that we're talking, we know each other for a while, and we both did a lot to normalize relations between Ukraine and Hungary. We were really keen to achieve this goal. Like some months ago, we met in Uzhhorod in Ukraine, and we launched a bilateral track to resolve all outstanding issues in our bilateral relations. This conversation continues. Peter represents Hungary, and myself and Head of Presidential Office Andriy Yermak, we represent Ukraine, and our position is simple. We want to resolve bilateral issues on a bilateral basis, and we are committed to it, and we are making steps forward. And we count that Hungary will not be blocking Ukraine-related steps at the EU and NATO level when it comes to this, because we did provide assurances that we are willing to solve the outstanding issue on a bilateral basis, and we are already working on it.
Okay, next one, another neighbor of Ukraine, Poland, Agnieszka, I see you with us, so please make your question. Yeah, just switch on.
Yeah. Okay, I'm fine. Good to see you, Good evening. My first question would be, would you think that such countries as Moldova and Georgia, I have in mind South Ossetia, of course, are next targets of Putin? And please, if you find time to comment on Ukrainian-Polish relations right now, and if there are any negotiations concerning farmers, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
I don't know why everyone forgot about the document that Russia distributed in December, I think December 2021. In that official document, Moscow demanded that NATO rolls back to the 1997 borders in Europe, which coincide with the borders of the former socialist bloc controlled by the Soviet Union, of which Poland was a member. So I wouldn't limit Putin's ambitions only to Moldova, Georgia, and Georgia. His plans are going far, far further, and he will move as further as he is allowed to. And this is why the most efficient way to prevent a situation when when NATO and Central European countries will have to be fighting Russian soldiers in their own territory, is to help Ukraine defeat Russia in our own territory. It's a very simple math, because whatever the price of helping Ukraine is, the price of fighting a war yourself is much, much higher, including the ultimate price that we are paying, which is the loss of human lives. So if we are to agree that, and everyone seems to agree, that Putin believes that the loss of the Soviet Union is the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, and it was a quote of him, and he wants to restore it, then his aggressive ambitions go far beyond the borders of his immediate neighbors. Although he does not recognize the rights of many nations to remain sovereign within existing borders. So countries in Central Asia should feel worried as well. On Ukrainian-Polish relations, I think everything is fine except trade and mainly agricultural trade. We have good engagement on the issue of security assistance, good cooperation on EU and NATO tracks. We have an issue with agriculture, and our relevant experts are working on it. I think the less this issue is politicized, the better, the higher will be the chances to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Let's now go across the ocean. I see Francesca Chambers with us from USA Today, so it's your turn.
Thank you very much. A couple questions. First, what is Ukraine's stance on the waivable no-interest loan that U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham proposed yesterday during his trip? And on a related note, when do you expect the ATACMS the U.S. is sending to Ukraine to arrive? And then finally, if you could please elaborate on the anticipated outcomes of the NATO-Washington summit later this year that was discussed during the conversation with Secretary Blinken, that would be much appreciated.
Ukraine already receives support in different forms. Some of it comes as grants, in the form of grants, and other support comes in the form of loans. So we are not shocked to hear the proposal coming from the United States. But the question is, of course, how about the overall structure of the assistance that will be provided. And we haven't seen any details of this proposal except the broad mentioning of loans instead of grants. We have to really look into details, but it's not something that shocks us because, as I told you, we already receive support in different forms. What really matters and what shocks us, what does shock us, is that the decision hasn't been adopted yet. We are approaching the end of March, and deliberations continue. Deliberations on the issue of vital interest to strategic interests of the United States and in Europe and globally. Because, as I mentioned in my remarks, the success of Putin in Ukraine will mean that other places in the world will flare up, because some countries will feel motivated to follow Russian footprints. So again, the cheapest way to avoid bigger expenditures on world security, on keeping the world together, is to support Ukraine today. So we want this debate in the United States to be over in a good way, with a final decision that will reestablish that will not allow the American leadership in the world to be shattered. The second question was on ATACMS. Yes, ATACMS 300, the long range, is very much needed and expected in Ukraine. We are waiting for it to happen. And the third question was on Washington Summit. Well, we are in very active engagement with NATO leadership, but also with key allies on what the outcome of Washington Summit should be. You know our position very well. We think that Ukraine meets the main criteria of membership, which is the capacity to defend NATO borders. That's what we are doing by defending Ukraine. But I wouldn't go too far in commenting on the stage of our deliberations with partners, because we are, let me just say this, we are working hard to make a strong, and far-reaching step towards Ukraine's membership in NATO at the Washington Summit.
Let's go to South America now. Luis Cavaguti from Brazil. It's your turn.
Thank you. Please, Minister, can you address the struggle for support from Global South nations? And if you could mention Brazil, because I've learned that you tried to come to Brazil to meet our Minister of Foreign Relations, and he's delaying this visit, even your visit and visit of Mr. Zelensky. Can you address that, please?
Well, the overall pattern is very simple. When Ukraine is demonstrating significant successes on the battlefield, we see Global South countries leaning more towards Ukrainian position. When the situation gets more stable in terms of Russian stance on the ground, we see Global South countries becoming more more balanced in their positions. So the political dynamics, to a good extent, depend on the military dynamics, on the dynamics on the front line. I have very good contact with the Brazilian foreign minister. Every time we need to talk, we do so. My team is working on arranging my tour over Latin American countries, and of course Brazil. I hope Brazil will be part of it. So the discussion on the dates of my visit is still undergoing. But but the overall message to global: if Russia prevails in Ukraine, Global South, the regions, the countries that comprise Global South, will be the first to experience spike in violence and cross-border aggressions in their respective regions. So for this reason, it makes perfect sense for them to stand by Ukraine.
Let's now jump to Asia, because it's late night there, so I hope we can let them go. Carmel from Indonesia, if you're with us, it's your turn.
Good evening. So Moscow has alleged that 10 Indonesians were fighting alongside the Ukrainian military as mercenaries against Russia. According to them, there were 10 Indonesian mercenaries in Ukraine. 4 of them were said to have been among those killed. Can you confirm or deny anything to say about Russia's allegation of Ukraine using foreign mercenaries? Thank you.
I'm not familiar with this fact about the participation of Indonesian citizens in the war. But the overall principle is very simple. You cannot call a man or a woman who fights on the side of the country that exercises its right to self-defense according to UN Charter a mercenary. A person who fights on the side of the country that committed a crime of aggression against another sovereign nation is a mercenary, is complicit in the act of aggression against another country. So I think this rhetoric of Russian officials is completely irrelevant and inappropriate, irrespective of the nationalities it refers to.
We stay in Asia, China, Banglu, the paper, your turn.
Thank you, Minister. We know China's special envoy Li Hui finished his second round of 10-day shuttle diplomacy to Europe a week ago, since the war has headed into its third year. So I want to know, how does the Ukraine government view China's role as the mediator now? And also, China recently proposed to hold an international peace conference with equal participation of both Ukraine and Russia. I want to know what's Ukraine's expectation on it. Thank you.
We had a very meaningful exchange of conversation with my colleague, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, in Munich. As a result of this conversation, Minister Wang Yi deployed his special envoy to Europe, and we had a good exchange with him in Kiev. He had all the briefings and meetings to get a comprehensive understanding of the situation. As I said, these were meaningful conversations, and we look forward to continuing them. As regards the peace conference that you mentioned, I don't have any official proposal on the table, so therefore I cannot comment on it. What is clear to me is that, first, China definitely has a very big potential to play in putting this war, this Russian aggression against Ukraine, to an end, because of the special relationship that China enjoys with Russia. Second, Ukraine and China never had any issues in our major issues in our bilateral relations, so the trust is there. And finally, the main peace proposal that is on the table in the world now is Ukraine's peace formula, proposed by President Zelensky. And we are working on it, including the convening of the first inaugural summit of the peace formula. And it was a subject of our discussion with the Chinese representative as well.
Let's now go to Africa. Tony Muchama from Kenya.
Thank you very much. We have just come from seeing Mr. Putin get a very fake mandate from his, very fake election recently. And my question is, the Americans are still seem to be on a bit of video pause with several $1 billion that they're supposed to be, well, not supposed to be, but President Biden has been asking that they give Ukraine to help it defend herself further. So my question to our dear Mr. Minister is, what contingency plans do you have for the time being, as the Americans, while they're still on pause? What contingency plans, this war still looks to be stalemate at the front? Thank you.
First, I think the American assistance will come. Second, we see our European partners significantly ramping up military production and purchases in the third countries to help Ukraine, and it helps us to fill the gap that has been created by the delay in the US decisions. It does not solve the problem entirely, but it helps to sustain the pressure. And third, we are increasing our own production of weapons. But again, this is more than just about specific support that the United States are or not providing. This is about trust in the capacity of the United States to support the countries who stand by the same rules and principles that the United States defend all over the world. It's much, much broader than about Ukraine, because if the United States cannot help Ukraine, then the question is who else they can help. Shall a war of this or smaller scale break out in other parts of the world? So assistance will come, contingency plans are there, but the question at stake is much, much broader.
Let's go now to Egypt. Guide Munaf.
Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs in Ukraine. This is Gaid Munaf, a journalist from Al News. What is the Ukrainian vision due to the leak of weapons and Western support in the front?
Views to what?
Leak of Western weapons in the front. What do you mean leak?
Can you please elaborate?
Yes, please. I'm asking about, we hear that a lot of support from Europe and from America, but in the front we don't see that a lot of weapons. How do you think about Ukrainian defense will be stay and will be defense the west of Ukrainian places from the Russian attacks? This is my question.
At the smart use of available weapons and heroism of soldiers. This is the solution to a situation when you lack weapons in sufficient quantities. And of course, in the backtrack, there is a constant, permanent effort to find new sources of weapons and ammunition for the army. And we have solved many of the problems. For example, this year, Ukraine only will produce more than 1 million drones for the front line, and this is a significant number. This year, our partners will significantly increase production of artillery ammunition. This year, our partners changed their own previous decision when the European Union decided they would not be spending money on buying ammunition from outside of Europe. So they changed this opinion, they changed this decision, and they are buying it now. So, but while all of this is happening, we will be keeping the lines with resources available to us, and we've been pretty successful in that, because the only success that Russia had on the front line so far was Avdiivka, but it was a painful battle. But the whole Russian army, look at the map, at the size of Ukraine and Russia. And the biggest achievement of the Russian army in Ukraine is the takeover of a small regional town, and they succeeded in that after months of heavy fighting. So I think that also speaks for itself and for the efficiency of the actions of our soldiers.
Do we have Adil Turdukula from Kyrgyz Republic with us? TV Academy. If you're with us, then it's your turn. Adil Turdukulov? Okay, no. Let's go then to Bhanu Chandra from India.
Hello, Minister. I was just
Wait. Please, we only want to hear Bhanu Chandra, no one else. Thank you.
Hello, Minister. We just saw the regime continuation in Russia yesterday, but this year there will be dozens of countries going for the polls. How have you charted your roadmap to tackle the regime change, or in case it continues, the same regime continues?
Про вибори в різних частинах світу. Yes, this year will be rich in elections in many places of the world, and of course Ukraine does not meddle in anyone else's elections, but we follow all of them closely, And, elections in a normal country, elections is an issue of reality. So whatever the outcome of these elections is in any country of the world, if these are democratic elections, we, Ukraine, will find the way to work with this reality, whatever it is. Because it's the choice of the people of that nation and we have to respect it. But elections in Russia are outside of reality. They are surreal. They are not real. So I don't expect any changes in the Russian policy, in the policy of Russia, because it was just these so-called elections were just a formality. With regard to all other countries, whoever you choose, we will be working with them.
I saw with us Spanish MFA. If you're still with us, then it's your turn.
Spanish, right?
Yes, Spanish MFA. Yeah,
okay,
you.
So you mentioned, Mr. Minister, you mentioned the Black Sea success as one example of how Ukraine can win the war. What do you expect from the campaign of attacks to Russian oil refineries? How do you think it can influence the situation, and what Ukraine expects from this kind of actions that seem to be successful? But
when you say attacks on Russia, you don't mean Crimea, no? You mean the mainland Russia?
In the Russian Federation, yeah.
Listen, whatever happens in the territory of the Russian Federation should be explained by the leadership of the Russian Federation. But whatever is happening there is a direct consequence of the illegal and unprovoked aggression of Russia against Ukraine. If Putin did not launch the aggression, thousands of Russians would not be killed in Ukraine and nothing would be happening in Russia itself. But again, let him explain what is happening there. When regards to the when it comes to the Black Sea, yes, you see, we critics or skeptics like to say that defeating Russia is impossible. So helping Ukraine to attain this goal doesn't make any sense. But how could a country that has virtually no navy defeat the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation, which is Ukraine? How could a country without sufficient amount of weapons and ammunition liberate 50% of the territories Russia had occupied since 24th February 2022? So this is not an excuse. We can and we do defeat Russia when we have everything that we need to achieve this goal. Thank you.
One last brief one from Japan, Gakushi Fujiwara, Asahi Shimbun. Your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. My name is Gakushi Fujiwara from the Asahi Shimbun, Japanese newspaper. Do you have any updates on the timing of the Global Peace Summit in Switzerland, and how many countries do you expect to be participating? And also, what do you expect for Japanese government to do in the Peace Summit? Thank you.
No, I don't have any details to tell you, because when you aim at organizing such a large event, you have to reconcile schedules, you have to ensure participation, and therefore the date of the summit is still being discussed, because we expect participation at the level of leaders. The venue is clear, it will be in Switzerland, and we expect from Japan to take active part in it, in this summit at the level of Prime Minister, and of course to work with us on engaging other countries and getting them on board of this initiative. This concludes my briefing. I really have to run, but I hope it was helpful. Have a safe day and see you soon one day.